John chapter 20. Welcome to Easter Sunday in November. Easter Sunday in November, John chapter 20. I want to start with an illustration so that you can understand what John's trying to do in his gospel. It's a made-up illustration. I heard a pastor give it one time, and I thought, it's the best thing that I've heard to illustrate what is John trying to do with his gospel. What is he trying to get us to understand? We've heard over and over and over again as we're going through John's gospel that the purpose is that you believe. We're coming up on the verses where John says specifically, I'm recording these things so that you believe. But how is he actually doing that? So the illustration, it's made up. It goes something like this to help you hopefully understand what John's doing. Later today, you're at home and you're just sitting and relaxing, and you're at home and someone comes, knocks on your door. Knock, 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 bang, 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 bang. And you open the door, and it's a friend, a good friend of yours, but they look somewhat distraught. And so you say, what's going on? You know, come inside, let's talk, come inside. And you get inside and you sit down, and they say, your brother Jim is dead. And you say, how's that possible? I just saw him today. I just saw him this morning. I was with him this morning. I saw him. I don't understand. How's that possible? What happened? And your friend says, I know you were with him this morning, but we went to the game. We just went to the game, and we were on the sidewalk. We were walking, and we were going there, and then there was a car, and we heard the car, and they screeched, the tires, and we heard it behind us, and by the time we looked, it was hitting him, and he was standing next to me, and the car didn't hit me, but it hit him, and he went up over top, and I saw it. There was nothing I could do about it. We called the ambulance. I held him. They couldn't do anything. He's gone. I'm sorry. And the response that you give in that moment is, I see. You didn't understand at the beginning, but based on the witness, you see. What does it mean when you say in response, I see? I understand what you're saying. What you're saying to him in that moment is, the witness has become a window to reality. You see through the witness now to reality. My brother's dead. I didn't understand before. I didn't know. But here's the evidence. It's the witness sitting right in front of me, sharing with me this information. And now I see. John wants you to see through him like he's a window to reality. And the reality is this, that Jesus Christ resurrected from the dead. He's trying to get you to understand, see through me. I was there. I watched him die on a cross. I saw the empty tomb. He's witnessing to everyone who reads this gospel. See through me. See the truth. I'm trying to be a window to you. Because the purpose of why John writes is that you might believe the truth, reality. So the question becomes, how do you approach the resurrection? How do you approach the resurrection and the stories of a resurrected Jesus in the scriptures? What do you do with the evidence, the witness that Jesus Christ is resurrected from the dead? John is giving you a witness. He's trying to show you reality. How do you approach the resurrection? There's lots of people out there who are just skeptical. Anybody know Bill Nye the Science Guy? If you watch things about him, he's agnostic. He thinks there may be a divine creator out there, but he thinks you can't know anything about them. And so if you watch him do any sort of debates or anything like this, he'll say this 1,000,000 times, I'm highly skeptical. I'm highly skeptical. I'm highly skeptical. You provide him all the evidence you want, and he'll say, I'm highly skeptical. Some people that just believe it's a myth, a fairy tale. I mean, it's a good story. We should try and live like this guy who is Jesus, and we don't know if he was real, maybe not real, historical, I don't know. But that story, this is probably just a myth. It's a fairy tale. It's kind of made to make you feel good. And There's some people in the room, no doubt, hopefully, I'm almost positive, I'm 99.9% sure, there are some people who believe it. That's their response to the resurrection. They believe it. There's some people in our church that come to our church every single week, and they come for various different reasons. They want to be involved in community. Their family member comes who's a believer, and they want to believe because in their mind they're thinking, well, it sounds pretty good. If heaven's a real place, I'd like to go there, probably. But the reality is although they're hopeful, they're unconvinced. I'm just unconvinced, not really sure if I really believe this stuff. There's the straight deniers, naturalists, people who are like, miracles don't happen. Miracles are just unexplained science. We just need to figure it out. And one day we'll figure it out and we'll prove all you crazies wrong about miracles. There's some people who just think it's a lie. I have a good friend, a very good friend, close friend of mine, who, if you would have asked him, he would say, the resurrection, Jesus, religion, these are just miracles. These are just weak human constructs developed that don't fit reality, really. They're trying to make people feel better about their lives, give you some purpose, give you some meaning, but in reality, they're holding you back because they're telling you that you're weak and sinful and really you're strong and powerful and you just need to accept who you are and give up all that religion stuff. I'm waiting for him to come to his senses. I don't know when that will be. I hope it's before he stands face to face with Jesus. The question is, how do you approach the resurrection? The miraculous. A man who gave up his own life, and then the scripture said, took up his own life. There's two sections in John chapter 20. The first half of John chapter 20 is resurrection morning in the morning, verses 1 to 18. And then verses 19 through the end of the chapter are resurrection evening, Easter Sunday evening. We'll talk about that next week. We're going to deal with the first 18 verses today. So what happened in the morning? Before I start reading, just one more thing. Don't get bogged down with the details, comparing John's gospel to Matthew's gospel to Luke's gospel. You'll get bogged down and you'll never make it past verse 1 or 2. Ask me how I know this from my research this past week. The gospel writers included the details that they needed to make their point. None of them had intended to give you this happened first, and this is who was there, and this is how long they stayed, and then they went and got this person, and this is how far they came, and then this person, and that. Nobody's trying to give us a full account of who went where, when, with whom, and how many. They all have given their specific details for specific reasons, so I don't want you to get bogged down with the details, trying to make everything fit. It's difficult to know what details are new information and what details overlap information with the gospel writers. One day, when we get to heaven, they can sit and tell us which details are which and where go where. Also, some of the gospel writers didn't intend to write chronologically, so that throws a whole nother wrench in the system. Don't get bogged down in the details. When you're reading John's gospel, ask yourself, why is John including these details of these stories? What's his purpose? And you will be just fine. John chapter 20, starting in verse 1. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark and saw the stone was already away from the tomb. So she ran and came to Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved, whom we know to be John the Apostle, the one writing this gospel, and said to them, they have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. So get this, Mary sees the stone rolled away, and her conclusion is not, Jesus resurrected from the dead. Her conclusion is, somebody stole the body. The body's gone, somebody took it, we need to find it. So she runs back to Peter and John, and she doesn't run back to Peter and John saying, there, he resurrected, just like he said. He said he was going to, he told us, it's 3 days, now he's resurrected, isn't that so cool, he's the Messiah? None of that. Somebody took the body. That's the best she can come up with. So how do you approach the resurrection? Maybe you approach the resurrection by misinterpreting it, which is what Mary does on the front end. You see some of the evidence, you've got a portion of it, and you misinterpret. There is lots of people in the world who, given this much portion of the evidence, when they first see it, your first response is to misinterpret it. Maybe some of you in the room, that's your story. I was given evidence of Jesus Christ and who he was and his resurrection, and my first response was, nah, I don't believe that, to misinterpret the evidence. There's 1.5 plus 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and they misinterpret the resurrection. They're the same as Mary. No different. It's okay if that was your first response. It's okay if that is your response to the resurrection at this point. Don't be afraid. You don't have to be discouraged. Follow along as the story goes with Mary. But before we continue with Mary's story, John and Peter then get up and they say, well, we got to go look for ourselves. Verse 3. So Peter and the other disciple, that is the Apostle John referring to himself, went forth, and they were going to the tomb. The two were running together, and the other disciple ran ahead faster than Peter and came to the tomb first, and stooping in, he looked and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. So, I don't know what was going on between John and Peter, but they had a thing. They had a weird thing where John was like, I need to inform you that I'm much faster than Peter. How's this information make it into a gospel? I don't know. But anyways, he thought that was an important detail to include. I am much faster than Peter. The point is that John's first response to the empty tomb is he's skeptical. I call him the skeptical evaluator. He's going to see the evidence. Mind you, Peter and John, when they run to the tomb, they're not running to see the resurrected Jesus. The report that Mary gave was somebody stole the body. They're just going to see if the body's still there. They're not looking for a resurrected Jesus. They're looking for a body and trying to figure out what happened. I say that John is the skeptical evaluator because John runs up to the tomb, but he doesn't go in. He just peeks in from the outside. For those of you who know that the stone would have only been probably maybe waist high or about like this. And so in order to get in, you would have had to duck to get in. If you go to Israel with Roger, you will be able to go in. You'll see a little stone rolled away, and you'll be able to duck and go in there, and it'll be a blast. So go to Israel. See it for yourself. And so you'll have to duck and go in there. And so John's just standing there outside going, Jesus? I don't know if he said that. He's skeptical. I don't know why he doesn't go in. Maybe he thinks that if I go in there, it's probably going to stink. Maybe he's standing outside thinking it's been 3 days. Maybe I'll just stand outside and smell and see if there's still a body in there or not. Maybe he's concerned with Jewish law. I mean, Jewish law says if you're around anything that's dead, you're considered unclean. And so maybe he's not interested in going through all that. And so he's thinking, if I run straight into this tomb and Mary's got it wrong and I see this dead guy in there, now I'm exposed and I'm unclean and I got to go through that process. I don't have time for that. I got to go to work tomorrow. I don't know. It doesn't say. But for whatever reason, he's somewhat skeptical. He doesn't go in. Peter is the opposite. The one thing to know about John and the skeptical evaluator is that John doesn't have all the evidence. Because he's skeptical, although he's evaluating, he's only evaluating based on part of the evidence because he won't go in and see all of the evidence. Peter's not like that. Peter just goes running straight in. Verse 6. So Simon Peter came following him and entered the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and he saw the face cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up by itself. So I call Peter the truth seeker. For whatever reason, Peter doesn't care whether there's a dead guy in there. He doesn't care whether Mary's story's right or wrong. He wants to see the truth for himself. So I'm just going to go headstrong right into this tomb. I'm not going to stand and look from the outside. I'm going in to find all the evidence I can find. If there's no body there, I want to know why there's no body there. And I want to get the evidence for myself. Peter is the truth seeker. But Peter gets the unique opportunity on the front end to get all the evidence. Peter sees the stone rolled away as he's approaching the tomb. He sees that as he's running up. He goes straight into the tomb, and now he sees it's empty. No body there. No body there. And the reason why he knows there's no body there is because the linen wrappings where you wrap the body are still lying there in their place, but flat. No body there. And then he goes in and he sees that not only are the linen wrappings lying there, whoever used to be wrapped in these linen wrappings took the time to unwrap the face cloth and roll it up in a nice little neat roll and set it to the side. For some reason, John couldn't see this standing outside the tomb, but Peter, going in, he's the truth seeker, he finds all the evidence. Then John follows. Verse 8. So the other disciple who had come first to the tomb also entered. He saw and believed. Now, the question is, why? Why, seeing the evidence now, does he now say, it was at that moment when I went into the tomb and I saw no body and I saw the linen cloths and I saw the face wrappings and the stone rolled away? Why does he say at that moment, seeing all that evidence, I saw and I believed? There's some people who think that Jesus never died, and we talked last week a whole bunch, reason after reason after reason that the scriptures give that prove, or at least give evidence upon evidence upon evidence that Jesus did in fact die. But the other question comes is, maybe somebody stole the body, just like Mary had concluded. Maybe he didn't resurrect from the dead. Maybe that's just a myth, a fairy tale, untold story. But here's what the linen wrappings show. How many people do you think, if they came in, rolled the stone away, and took the body, how many people do you think would take the time to unwrap the body? How many people would come after 3 days of a body being dead, a body that was stripped and beaten and destroyed, bloodied, mess, wrapped? How many people do you think would take the time to unwrap, take the body, leave the wrappings? So they're going in, and they're looking at the wrappings laying there, and they're saying, the body's not been moved. There's no body here. Because who would do that? Nobody would do that. Who would take the time to unwrap the face and roll the linen cloths up real nice and set them aside as if they're going to be used again? Nobody. And so they go in the tomb, and they see the stone rolled away, and it's empty, and the linen cloths are sitting there, and the face cloth, and all of a sudden it clicks for John. The body's not been stolen, resurrected from the dead. He's alive. And John says, in that moment, he believed. As high profile as Jesus was at the time, crowds flocking to him, worshiping him as king, and then crowds standing in the courts and saying, crucify him, crucify him. The Romans actually being the ones who crucified him, the religious elite hating him. How many people do you think are motivated to find that body if he's stolen from the tomb? Hundreds. Citywide manhunt. Find the body of this guy who was in this tomb so that the Christians will stop saying he resurrected from the dead. There's a whole bunch of history of evidence of people saying and dying and believing that Jesus Christ resurrected from the dead, and there's no legitimate evidence of anybody claiming this is the physical body of the guy who was Jesus the Nazarene who died. We have his body. He's not resurrected from the dead. You guys are nuts. No evidence for that. This is what makes John and Peter believe. There's wrappings, no body, empty tomb. And you'll remember from the last chapter that John said, oh, by the way, there was nobody else buried in this tomb. Jesus was the only one. So you can't argue that it was somebody else. Up to this point, though, John admits, looking back on the story, up to this point, up to being in the tomb, seeing the linen cloths, the empty tomb, no body, up to this point, they had not understood what the scriptures were saying. Verse 9. He says, for as yet they, himself and Peter, did not understand the scriptures, that he must rise again from the dead. And so the disciples went away to their own home. They see, he says, we believe. We didn't understand it coming up to that point, but then we did, and we went home because we realized he's resurrected from the dead. Now, the following verses in the interaction that we have between Jesus and Mary in the next few verses, has anybody ever physically seen, talked with the resurrected Jesus? Okay, good. That's good. The experience that Mary's going to have in the next few verses, none of us will likely have. I'm almost positive that none of us will get to see Jesus face to face before he comes back and he'll testify or witness to us in front of our face and we'll hear his voice. None of us will likely have that experience. But all of us have the experience that John and Peter had at this point. We have evidence of a resurrected Jesus Christ. And the question is, what do you do with the evidence? All of us have to choose to look at the evidence. For Peter and John, it was an empty tomb, linen cloths, and a man that they had walked with who told them, I'm going to die and resurrect from the dead. And they said, I know what happened. For us, it's the Bible, the witness. You can go back to the Old Testament prophecies. Don't take my word for it. Go back, read your Old Testament. Ask, does Jesus apply to these things? Could his life possibly have been a fulfillment of these things? You decide. Read the New Testament evidence going back to the Old Testament, because all the writers in the New Testament go back to the Old Testament constantly. Say, look, he fulfilled this and this and this. Consider their witness. The New Testament was preserved by God for 2,000 years now. Witness of Jesus' life, death, resurrection. I've said this before, and I'll continue to say this. This book is the most historically verifiable ancient document in all of human history. If you cannot get behind its witness, then you cannot trust any ancient source for our history of our world. This is the most testified. We have more resources for this book than anything else. It's no wonder, too, because if this was the Son of God who died and he was the Messiah, then absolutely God would be interested in preserving his testimony. There's eyewitnesses who died because they believed. They were martyrs. This is the evidence that you and I have to consider when we consider the resurrection. What does the New Testament say? Does Jesus actually fulfill Old Testament prophecies? Or were they just false prophets? And what about those people who died believing? And then today, the church, you and I, believers, sitting in this room today saying, my life's been changed as a result. I lived this way, and then I believed, and now my life is this way. And I hope that people who knew you 20 years ago and who know you now can say, yeah, significant change. I hope. So that your and I life becomes a testimony to the world that Jesus Christ is real. Changed lives. Makes a big difference. How do you approach the resurrection? What will you do with the evidence of the resurrected Jesus? Mary is going to continue misinterpreting in the following verses, verse 11. Mary was standing outside the tomb weeping. And so as she wept, she stooped and looked in the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting, one on the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? And she said to them, Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. She's still not looking for a resurrected Jesus. She's looking in. If she's looking in, she no doubt sees the linen cloths. So she sees more evidence and yet still misinterprets. She's still looking for the body, and she says to the angels, I'm still looking for the body. She's not yet connected the evidence that she's seeing with the resurrected Jesus Christ. So then she encounters Jesus. Verse 14, when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there and did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? Supposing him to be the gardener. Remember, we said last week that John included this detail, that the tomb was in a garden. So that when we get to this point, you understand why Mary would be confused. And she said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. You get that Mary's still looking for a dead Jesus. The reason why she can't evaluate the evidence that's right in front of her face is because she's not looking for the truth. She's not looking for a resurrected Jesus. She's looking for a dead Jesus. Listen, if you're trying to speak to someone about who Jesus is and you're giving them evidence after evidence after evidence, and it just seems like they will not believe, and you're starting to think to yourself, this seems like a choice. They are seeing mountain loads of evidence, and they seem to not want to believe. Most likely, they're not looking for the truth. They're not looking for a resurrected Jesus. Most likely, they're looking for a dead Jesus. And you can give them mountain loads of evidence, but if they're not looking for a dead Jesus, they will speak to him, and they will hear from him, and they will have no idea that the one they're speaking to is resurrected from the dead. So don't be confused. There's lots of people in the world who are just like Mary, evidence upon evidence upon evidence upon evidence, and still they choose to misinterpret what's right in front of their face. Notice in verse 14 that even though Mary saw Jesus, that seeing is very different than seeing and believing. She saw Jesus with her own eyes, and yet it didn't click. And so when the scriptures talk about seeing Jesus, it's not just with your eyes. It's seeing and believing. It's the witness becoming a window into reality. Notice that in the next verse, Jesus speaks to her and she hears his voice and still no connection that this is the resurrected Jesus. Notice that hearing is very different than hearing and understanding. We hear all the time, but that doesn't mean we hear and understand. So you see the difference of believing and not believing? Lots of people who don't believe see and hear the evidence. But only those who believe see and hear and understand and choose to believe. It's a big difference. Lots of people in the world say they can't believe. I just can't believe. I can't get my mind wrapped around it. I just can't believe. There's, as I said, 1.5 plus billion Muslims around the world, and they say, I just can't believe that Jesus Christ is resurrected from the dead. Mary becomes the first in the story to recognize the resurrected Jesus in person. She's not the first to believe in the story, but she's the first to recognize him in person. Verse 16, Jesus says, Mary. Woman, why are you here? What are you looking for? I'm looking for the body. There's a body, and we lost it, and we need somebody to find it. So if you know where it is, just tell me where it is, and I'll go find it. And she's in tears, and he says, Mary. I'm standing right in front of you. I'm your evidence. If you've lived like Mary, misinterpreting the resurrection of Jesus, thinking it's just a fairy tale, a myth, it's not real, it's a made-up story, not to your benefit, this verse is hope for you. Jesus says to her, Mary, and she turns to him, and in Hebrew says, Rabboni, which means teacher. It's okay if you go through a portion of your life. Likely, lots of our stories have gone through a portion of our life misinterpreting the resurrection. And it's okay, because there's still hope. There's still a moment for you when Jesus could come and say, Anthony, wake up. And you say, oh, and you realize that this whole time you've been misinterpreting. If you want the peace, the rest, the hope that you're looking for in life, you cannot find it by misinterpreting Jesus. You have to interpret rightly, or you will not find the peace, the hope that you're looking for. At some point between verse 16 and verse 17, Mary must have gone and just wrapped Jesus up. So he says, Mary, and she turns around and she eyes opened. Now she's listening, and she says, teacher. And then at some point she goes over and just wraps him up. I'm so happy you're here. I'm so glad you're. I don't know how you're here. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm bawling. And because then Jesus says this, verse 17. Jesus said to her, stop clinging to me. And here's the reason why. For I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I ascend to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God. We don't have time to unpack the complexity of this verse, but I will just tell you this. What Jesus is saying to Mary is, don't settle just for the resurrection. The ascension is also part of your inheritance as a believer. Oh yeah, if you live a few years on this life, you're looking forward to a resurrected body, made new, no more aches and pains, no more health challenges. I don't have to go to the doctor. They don't have to do all these crazy tests on me. By the way, I'm 31, and somebody who was 50-some told me the other day about the tests I was going to have to get when I was 50. And I'm thinking, a new body that doesn't have to get tested? That sounds great. Oh yeah, we're looking for resurrection, life made new, renewal from the inside out, new bodies restored, renewed. Yeah, we're looking for that, but the promise that comes with the ascension, Jesus going back to the right hand of the Father, is that part of our inheritance is that we get to be with God. It's not just renewed life on this planet. If this is all we have to look forward to, this life right now, this is a mess. We need more than this. Part of our inheritance is that we go to be with God. And so Jesus says to Mary, don't cling to me now. I got to ascend. It's part of your inheritance. You want me to ascend. Because when I do, you'll follow me. You'll follow me in death. You'll follow me in life. You'll follow me to be with the Father in heaven. It's all part of the inheritance. I think he's telling to Mary, don't just hold on to half of who Jesus is or your inheritance. Cling to the whole part of it. And his assumption is, after I've ascended to the right hand of the Father, then cling to me, so that you can have the fullness of your inheritance. Mary then goes announcing it to everyone else. Verse 18, Mary Magdalene came announcing to the disciples, I have seen the Lord, and he said these things, and that he said these things to her. How do you approach the resurrection? Do you misinterpret? I know the scriptures say that he resurrected from the dead, but I just think he never really died. Or I just think somebody stole the body. The misinterpreter sees the evidence, but misinterprets the evidence right in front of your face. Are you a skeptical evaluator? And this was me for probably most of my life. I'm skeptical, but I'm willing to look at the evidence, and I'm just on the front end skeptical. I'm more like John. I'd probably be running to the tomb saying, I really want the evidence. I'm not sure I want all the evidence. Let me just see. It's okay. Or are you the truth seeker like Peter? You don't care what the truth is. You just want it. Just give me the truth. I don't want to live a lie. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. It's pain to all those people around me. I just want to live in the truth. Just give me it, whatever it is. You'll notice that all three people end up believing the evidence eventually. God provides for each one of them very uniquely. To the misinterpreter, God gave more evidence, and more evidence, and more evidence, and eventually she believed. To the skeptical evaluator, God gave the truth seeker. John goes running up to the tomb, and he looks in, but he can't see all the evidence. And so to him, he was given a friend who just ran straight up into that tomb, because John followed Peter right afterwards. And that's a lot of my story. And the reason I end up in seminary, because I needed those who were seeking the truth to teach me, the skeptic, and show me the evidence. To the truth seeker, God says, here's the truth. Here's all of it. Here's your evidence. You can find it. The purpose of John writing his gospel is so that you might believe, so that his witness to you becomes a window to reality. The reality is there was a man 2,000 years ago who came from God because he was God, came to the earth, lived, died, resurrected from the dead. That's reality. John is trying to be a window for you. I saw it. I saw this guy on a cross. He handed his mother over to me. I watched him die. They didn't break his legs. I watched them take him down off a tomb. I know the two guys who took him down off the cross and put him in a tomb. And then I went to the tomb the following morning. Even though they said his body was stolen and gone, I went there and I saw the linen wrappings were there and the face cloth, and I saw. He's trying to be a window to you so that you can understand reality. Pray with me. God, you have managed to preserve the witness of your Son for 2,000 plus years. And if we count the preservation of the witness of the Old Testament prophets, of the Messiah who was to come, then it's thousands of years more. God, we're thankful that John would want to witness to you, that he would bear his soul out so that those who believe and read his testimony would believe. God, I pray you would open the eyes and the ears of those who came in here, and they have never known really what to do with your resurrection. But today they're willing to say, I believe. I believe because there's evidence, and now I see. And God, for those of us who you've already granted that we would see the evidence and see, God, would you remind us that our call is to be a witness to the world, to testify to the world that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, He resurrected from the dead, and they must believe. To follow suit with the apostles who went after you, to tap into the Spirit of God inside of us and to witness, to testify to the world around us. God, thank you that you didn't leave us as orphans, but that you came for us. God, come quickly. We're ready for you to come. In Jesus' name, amen.